O blindness of the great, they go their way like gods, great over bent backs, sure of hired fists, trusting in the power which has lasted so long, but long is not forever. O change from age to age, thou hope of the people. A major shocking news to the whole world. The unexpected happens. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigns, flees the country, and is seeking asylum. News travels fast. People are watching on their phones, on their laptops, on their TV screens. Their eyes are glued. They are following the occurrences. They are hearing and they are responding. And Africans are watching. Remember, a lot has happened in the second half of the year from June. 7 days of rage in Kenya, 10 days of rage in Nigeria. In Uganda, there have been protests. And in other parts of Africa, many citizens are watching and looking at these events as they unfold. Welcome to Revitalized Africa, as we look into the lessons that we pick and draw as Africans from the occurrences in Bangladesh. Now, before we go into the lessons that we pick, let's take a brief history. Let's travel a historical journey, just in summary, from 1971 when Bangladesh gets its independence. Sheikh Hasina, the outgoing PM, 76 years old, as I recall, is the daughter of the founding president, or the founding father of the country. Her father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. In 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman leads a revolution against the Pakistani. And in this revolution, Bangladesh gets its independence. And so he becomes the first president. But as things go on, a lot of politics occur. And in 1975, there is a military-led coup. And in this military-led coup, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is assassinated. As news has it, he sprayed a total of 18 bullets. A number of members of his family are killed in the process. But at this time, his daughter, Sheikh Hasina, is in Germany. She receives the news. Of course, as a child who loses her parent in such circumstances, they will feel sad and they will have to strategize some steps on how to correct the wrong. And so at this time, Sheikh Hasina starts planning on how to come back to Bangladesh and liberate her people, fight for the voiceless. But with the military takeover and the government that followed, things were not very good in Bangladesh. And the predominant factor, the predominant issue becomes the oppression and suppression of the opposition by the ruling regimes from that time onwards. And later on in 1991, she manages to come back to Bangladesh. At this time, she takes over the leadership of her father's party and she leads the opposition. And as has been common in Bangladesh, she gets mistreated, oppressed, jailed, falsely accused. Having undergone those circumstances. The news has it that she survived a total of about 19 assassination attempts. And when she first comes to power in 1996, her main goal, or one of the things that she endeared, was to stop the political oppression and muffling of the voices of the opposition. Because in the opposition, she had faced the same. And during her reign, from that period in 1996, and later coming back in the late 2008, 2009, to now 2024, when she was ousted, a lot has changed, or a lot changed. But before we go into the things that changed, let's first look at some credits of the good things that she did to the Bangladesh people. And finally, the very big achievement that can be accredited to her is the economic growth in Bangladesh from the time she took power. And whereas the economy might not have done so well as many would have expected, but she's one of the reasons that the Bangladesh economy has had the growth that it experiences. Remember, as it stands today in 2024, Bangladesh is the second largest garment exporter in the world. And so with all these, one thing, and one major thing, which has been the problem of Bangladesh from the time it got independence, eventually led to a downfall. And this is the use of force in settling political issues. The use of government machinery to settle political scores and political discourse. We now go to June 2024. Demonstrations break out in major universities in Bangladesh, led by this group of students calling themselves Students Against Discrimination. And what is the discrimination here? The discrimination is about the quota system. Now, the quota system was instituted in Bangladesh in 1971 when it got independence. It was instituted by the founders of the country. And the provisions of this system was that the children of the veterans who fought for independence had jobs reserved for them. And now the reservation was in different categories, where 30% was reserved for the children of veterans who fought for independence or liberation. And then 10% was reserved for the women who are affected by this liberation movement. And then another 40% of the jobs was reserved for districts that were lagging behind. So if you do that calculation, it brings about 80%, meaning that only 20% of the jobs in government were left for people to compete on in terms of merit. Meaning, people who did not fit into those categories would not get the reserved jobs, and therefore they only competed for 20%. And this has been an issue in Bangladesh from that time. Now, within that period between 1971 to date, there have been some amendments into this quota system. And at some point, for instance, the reservations that were meant for women who were affected by the liberation movement, by that war, it came a point where there were no more people to fill such vacancies. And therefore, the government decided that these vacancies would be reserved for women. And later on, there were some changes that were made into various provisions, but eventually there was still a reservation of 30%. And most Bangladeshis have been against this system. And as politics went on, there have also been political issues around who are the liberation veterans. And there have been politics around that. But now, in 2018, there was a serious demonstration by students against this system, which forced the Sheikh Hasina government to scrap out this quota system. But in 2024 June, the courts in Bangladesh reinstated the quota system, and demonstrations broke out again, with the university students leading the way to protest against this system. Now, remember, at this time, the economy is not also doing well, unemployment becoming a very serious problem in Bangladesh. And with the student-led protests, what followed is that the government used lethal force against the demonstrators who were students. And from the first day of protest, there were a number of deaths reported, several injuries. And as this continued, the students now later on started to demand for an apology from the government led by the Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. And as matters went on, it eventually reached a point where the citizens demanded the resignation of the Prime Minister. And on 5th August 2024, there was a massive protest with a very large number of protesters who breached the palace and invaded the palace in Bangladesh. And being concerned for her life, the Prime Minister had to leave the country. She resigned, left the country, flew into scenario. Remember, it is not the first time that we see the presidential residence or the presidential palace being invaded by angry citizens because of the government that does not pay attention to their needs. Not very long ago, we had the case of massive protests that happened in Sri Lanka, and the palace was invaded. As I make this video today, protests are still going on in Nigeria. A lot of deaths have been reported, a lot of arrests, abductions, and not long ago, just a few weeks ago, there were massive protests in Kenya. A lot of deaths reported, abductions, arrests, and it brings me to a point of thinking and wondering, as all these things happen and news travel fast through social media, what lessons do we draw from it?